The morning Mara decided to save her father's life was the same morning she lost her own. She didn't know that yet. She was standing in the hallway of St. Luke's Medical Center, still in her scrubs from a 12-hour shift, her phone pressed to her ear, listening to her father cry. Dr. Mara Ellison, 31 years old, single mother, the woman her colleagues called unshakable, felt her knees go soft against the wall. "How much?" she asked. $2.8 million. Her father's voice broke on the number. "Mara, I didn't know what else to do." She closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw her daughter, 6 years old, asleep in her dinosaur pajamas, waiting for a mother who was always running late. She thought about the life she'd built from scratch after her ex-husband walked out. The condo in Phoenix, the coffee maker she'd saved 3 months to buy, the Saturday mornings at the farmer's market that were the only hours in the week that felt like hers. "Who do you owe it to?" she asked. Silence. "Dad, a man named Cain Mercer." She'd never heard the name, but the way her father said it, like he was afraid the walls might be listening, told her everything she needed to know. "Get on a plane," she said. "You're coming to Phoenix. We're figuring this out together." "Mara, you don't understand. He already knows about you." Her blood went cold. She'd driven to Denver that same night, dropped Ren at her neighbor's house with a kiss and a promise to be back by Sunday. Told herself she was just going to talk, just going to assess the situation, just going to find a rational solution, because she was a doctor, and doctors were trained to stay calm in catastrophic circumstances. The house where the meeting was held wasn't a warehouse or a back alley. It was a building in the financial district, glass and steel, the kind of place that had a name etched in granite above the entrance. The name said Mercer Group. She almost laughed. A man in a charcoal suit met her in the lobby. He told her his name was Ward, said nothing else, and walked her to an elevator that required a key card she didn't have and a floor she wouldn't have known existed. They rode up in silence. Mara counted her own heartbeats to stay grounded. 17, 18, 19. The office was corner-facing, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was the kind of room designed to make you feel small. Bookshelves, dark wood, a desk the size of a dining table, and behind that desk, Cain Mercer. He was younger than she expected. Mid-40s, maybe. Dark hair going silver at the temples. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage, but he hadn't bothered with a tie. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows. He was reading something when she walked in, and he finished the paragraph before he looked up. That single detail told her more about him than any file could have. "Dr. Ellison," he said. "Not a question, Mr. Mercer." She didn't sit, didn't wait to be invited. "Tell me the number, the terms, and what exactly you want from my family." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in it. Interest, maybe, or recalibration. Like he'd prepared for one kind of conversation and she was offering another. "Your father borrowed money," he said. "A significant amount 3 years ago to cover losses from a business deal that didn't exist. The money went to gambling debts and a lifestyle that was already finished by the time he asked for it. He signed a contract. The contract is past due. He's sick," she said. "He had a stroke 8 months ago. He can't work. That's unfortunate. It doesn't change the terms." "What are the terms?" He leaned back in his chair. His eyes were dark, unreadable in the way of people who'd learned to strip the emotion out of their face before anyone could use it against them. "The debt transfers. To you. In exchange, your father's agreement is dissolved. He walks away clean." "Transfers how?" "I don't have $2.8 million. "No," he agreed. "But you have a skill set I need." She stared at him. "I'm a hospitalist. I treat internal medicine patients. I'm not a private doctor for hire." "I don't need a private doctor." He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city the way people looked at things they owned. "My daughter is 8 years old. She was diagnosed 14 months ago with a rare autoimmune condition. She's been through 4 specialists. None of them can stabilize her. Her last hospitalization was 6 weeks ago." He paused. "She needs someone who will actually stay." Mara was quiet. "The condition is complex. Managing it requires daily monitoring, protocol adjustments, coordination between specialists. The doctors I've hired treat her case. They don't treat her. They see a chart. I need someone who sees a child." "You're asking me to live here, in Denver, in my home." "Yes, as what?" He turned from the window, as her physician, as a member of the household. Whatever title makes the arrangement functional, and my father's debt is gone the day you arrive. She thought about laughing again. She didn't. I have a daughter, she said. She's 6. I'm not leaving her. She comes with you. There are good schools in Denver, better than Phoenix. Something about the certainty in his voice, not dismissive, just absolute. As if he'd already accounted for every obstacle, made her want to put a chair between them. I need time to think, she said. You have 24 hours. She left. Drove back to the hotel she'd checked into, instead of her father's apartment, because she couldn't look at him right now, couldn't stand in the same room without seeing the moment he'd decided she was the solution to a problem he'd made. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her own hands. Surgeon's hands, a resident had once told her. Precise, steady under pressure. They were shaking now. She called her neighbor, asked to keep Wren one more night. Then she lay back on the stiff hotel pillow and stared at the ceiling until the numbers on the bedside clock ticked past 2 a.m. And she knew she wasn't going to sleep. What she kept coming back to wasn't the debt. It was the girl, a sick child. 14 months of hospitalizations and rotating specialists and no one staying long enough to understand her. Mara knew that story. She'd seen it 100 times in her career. The families who came in desperate, already broken by a system that processed their child like a case number. The relief on a parent's face when someone finally sat down and actually explained what was happening. She hated Cain Mercer. She hadn't decided that yet consciously, but she felt it the way you felt a splinter before you found it. Something sharp under the surface. She went back the next morning at 9 o'clock. I have conditions, she said. He was already at his desk. He gestured to the chair across from him without looking up. This time she sat. My daughter stays with me, non-negotiable. She attends school here, maintains her routines as much as possible, and has access to her own space and privacy in whatever home we're in. Agreed. I maintain my medical license independently. I'm not employed by you. I'm there as a consulting physician with full authority over treatment decisions for your daughter. He looked up. Within reason. Without qualification. If you second-guess my medical judgment, I leave. That's not a threat. It's a professional standard. A pause. Agreed, and I want it in writing that this arrangement ends after 2 years. My debt obligation is satisfied regardless of outcome, as long as I'm practicing competent and ethical medicine. He picked up a pen, made a note. Is that everything? One more thing. She held his gaze. I won't pretend this is something it isn't. I'm here because you left me no choice, but your daughter doesn't need to know that. Whatever the adults in this situation have gotten themselves into, she doesn't carry it. You agree to that, or we're done before we start. Something moved across his face. Not quite surprise, more like someone hearing a frequency they'd stopped expecting. Agreed, he said. Then we have a deal. She didn't shake his hand. She walked out and called her neighbor and said she'd be back by noon to pick up Wren, and she needed to talk to her about something big. The house was in Cherry Creek, a neighborhood of wide streets and old trees and the quiet particular to places where wealth had been established for generations. Not showy, settled. The kind of house that had been a home before it became a transaction. Stone facade, 3 floors, a garden that was clearly tended by someone who actually cared about it. Mara stood on the front steps with Wren's hand in hers and her daughter's backpack on her shoulder and told herself to breathe. It's really big, Wren observed. It is. Do we have to share a room? No, baby. We get our own rooms. Wren considered this. Can I have the one with the window seat? She didn't know yet which room had a window seat, but she said yes anyway, because that was the kind of answer you gave a 6-year-old who was about to have the floor pulled out from under her life. The housekeeper, a woman named Bev, who had the quiet competence of someone who'd run difficult households for decades, showed them around. 6 bedrooms, a library, a sunroom, a kitchen that could have served a restaurant. A room on the 2nd floor that had been converted to a small medical suite with monitoring equipment Mara recognized and a few pieces she didn't. For Iris, Bev said simply, that was the daughter's name. Iris. Mara met her that afternoon in the sunroom. Cain was there too, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was welcome in his own room, and Mara filed that detail away. The girl was small for 8, dark-haired like her father, with the particular pallor of a child whose body had been fighting itself for over a year. But her eyes were sharp, curious. She was reading when they came in, and she marked her page before she looked up. "You're my new doctor?" she asked. "I am," Mara said. "My name's Dr. Ellison, but you can call me Mara if you want. Do you know what's wrong with me?" "Really no?" The last one said he was almost certain, but he said that the time before too. Mara sat down on the ottoman across from her, at eye level. "I've read your file thoroughly. I have some ideas I want to test. I'm not going to tell you I'm certain about anything until I am." Iris studied her. "That's a real answer. I try to give those." The girl looked past her to where Wren was hovering in the doorway, half hidden behind Mara's bag. "Who's that?" "That's my daughter." "Wren, how old is she?" 6. Iris looked at Wren with the evaluating expression of a child who'd spent too much time around adults. "Do you like dinosaurs?" Wren stepped forward immediately. "T-Rex is overrated," she said with complete conviction. Something happened on Iris's face. Something that hadn't been there before. "I think so too," she said, and moved over to make room on the couch. Mara sat in the chair across from them and watched her daughter hand over her battered field guide to prehistoric creatures, and felt the first thing she'd felt in 48 hours that wasn't fear. She still hated Cain Mercer. That hadn't changed, but she was going to help his daughter anyway. The first month was a kind of controlled war. Not with Cain, not directly, with the situation itself. Mara reorganized Iris's treatment protocol, cross-referenced her file with 3 recent studies, made calls to specialists in Chicago and Boston who owed her professional favors. She adjusted medication timing, introduced a dietary protocol the previous doctors had dismissed without adequate evidence, and slowly, week by week, Iris's numbers started to stabilize. The girl was brilliant and difficult and funny in the dry, sideways way of children who'd spent too long listening to adult conversations. She and Wren became inseparable in the way that only children can, quick and total, and completely unconcerned with the complicated circumstances their parents had created. Cain stayed out of Mara's medical decisions. He'd agreed to that, and he kept the agreement, but he was present in the house in ways she hadn't anticipated. Not intrusive, quiet. She'd come down at 6 a.m. to find him already in the kitchen making coffee, and he'd pour a second cup without asking, and set it on the counter without making her acknowledge it. He attended every briefing she gave on Iris's condition with complete, focused attention. He asked the right questions, not the questions of a man trying to demonstrate his intelligence, but the questions of a man who actually needed to understand. She didn't like how much she noticed these things. 3 months in, Iris had her best week since her diagnosis. No hospitalizations, energy levels up, sleeping through the night. She ate an entire plate of pasta at dinner and talked nonstop for 45 minutes about a book she'd read, and when she finally wound down, Cain looked across the table at Mara with an expression she didn't know what to do with. Not gratitude. Something rawer than gratitude. "Thank you," he said. It was just the 2 of them. The girls had gone up to Wren's room. Mara had stayed to finish her notes and ended up staying because the kitchen was warm, and she'd lost track of time. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We're not out of the woods." "I know." But she laughed today. She laughed at something on the television and didn't stop for a full minute. She hasn't done that in over a year. He looked down at his coffee cup. "I thought I was going to lose her." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about her mother." He was still for a long time. "She died when Iris was 3. Car accident. We'd been separated for a year before that. Iris doesn't really remember her." "I'm sorry." "She has photographs. I made sure of that." He turned his cup in his hands. "I haven't done everything right. I know that. I've done what I could, which is not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "It's not. Is that a judgment?" "It's an observation. I make them constantly. It's a professional habit." He looked at her. There was a quality to his attention when he focused it that she'd started thinking about more than she should, like being under a light that was too clear to be comfortable. "What do you observe about me?" "I observe that you love your daughter, and you're not sure you know how to show her that in ways she can receive. I observe that you're used to solving problems by acquiring resources, and it works, until it doesn't. I observe that you're genuinely trying to figure out the difference. And I haven't decided yet what to do with any of that." He almost smiled, just barely. Fair enough. She took her notes and went upstairs and stood in her room for a full minute before she could remember what she'd come up for. This was bad. She was aware that it was bad. She made a list, internally, the way she made differential diagnoses, the facts of the situation. He had leveraged her father's debt to bring her here. The arrangement was transactional. She had a daughter to protect, a career to maintain, a life to return to after 2 years. She could not afford to feel anything that complicated this. She went to bed and told herself she'd gotten the list straight. She woke up in the middle of the night to her phone ringing. Bev's extension. Iris's oxygen stats had dipped. Mara was in the medical suite in 90 seconds. Cain already there in a gray t-shirt and bare feet, looking every bit as afraid as he was trying not to look. They stabilized her together. Mara adjusted medication. Cain handled the monitoring equipment without being asked, held his daughter's hand, and talked to her in a low, steady voice about nothing important, a bike ride they'd taken last summer, a restaurant she'd liked, just keeping her present and calm while Mara worked. By 3 a.m., Iris was sleeping soundly. Her stats were good. The episode had been manageable. Mara stood in the hallway with her notes and her adrenaline crash and tried to get her hands to stop trembling. Cain appeared with a glass of water. Set it on the side table without comment. "You knew what to do," she said quietly. "With the equipment, I learned 6 months ago, after she came home from the hospital the 4th time. I wasn't going to keep waiting for someone to arrive." She looked at him. The hallway was dim, and it was almost 4 in the morning, and her list from earlier seemed very far away. "Who taught you?" the last physician. "He left after 2 months." A pause. "Before that, I taught myself." She thought about that. A man learning medical equipment in the middle of the night, alone, because he refused to be helpless while his daughter was sick. She thought about all the ways that could have gone wrong and how it hadn't, because he was the kind of person who didn't do things halfway. She picked up the water glass. Drank. "Get some sleep," she said. "She'll need you tomorrow, and you'll be useless if you're running on empty. That applies to you equally. I'm used to running on empty. It's called residency. Go." He went. She stood in the hallway alone and acknowledged, quietly and without drama, that her list wasn't working. The trouble came at month 5, from a direction she hadn't seen. Her father called. She'd been limiting contact deliberately, hurt and anger she hadn't had the bandwidth to process. But she answered because he was still her father. "Mara," he said, "I need you to listen." She listened. What he told her took 15 minutes and felt like a grenade with a 30-second fuse. The debt to Cain Mercer, real, definitely real, had been the result of her father falling in with a man named Soren Price, a business associate who'd manufactured the losing investment, then sold her father's debt to Cain's firm without disclosing the fraud. Her father wasn't just a gambling addict who'd signed her away. He was also a mark. Someone had used his weakness to engineer a very specific outcome. The question was whether Cain knew. She sat with that question for 3 days, turned it over the way you turned a suspicious lab result, looking at it from every angle. The facts. Her father's debt was real. Cain had acquired it legitimately as far as she could tell. He had used it to secure what he needed, her presence, her skills. Whether he knew the origin was manipulated was something she couldn't determine from her own thinking. She went to him on a Tuesday evening, after the girls were in bed. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and then I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. If you can't do that, tell me now and I'll figure out a different approach." He sat back. "Tell me." She did. All of it. Soren Price, the manufactured investment, the chain of transactions. She watched his face while she talked. She was good at watching faces. It was one of the most useful skills medicine had given her. What she saw was not the careful blankness of someone managing the reveal of a known thing. It was the sharp, reorganizing expression of someone whose mental model of a situation had just been forcibly redrawn. He was quiet for a long moment after she finished. "I acquired your father's debt 8 months ago through a portfolio purchase," he said. "I didn't know the originating transaction had been fraudulent. I knew your father was delinquent. I didn't know why." Another pause. Price. I know that name. From where? From a deal 2 years ago that fell through in ways I could never fully account for. I lost $3 million on it and never found the leak. His jaw tightened. If Price manufactured your father's situation specifically to place you in my orbit, then he's been working a longer timeline than I realized. What does he want with me? Not with you. His voice was quiet. Careful. With me. Through you. Your access to this house, to Iris's medical records, to my schedule and movements. He looked at her. He wants information about my firm. The room was very still. So I might have been someone's instrument, she said. You might have been. He held her gaze. But you weren't. Not the way he intended. Because you told me. She thought about that. About the fact that she could have sat on this information. Used it differently. Gone to Price herself, or gone to a lawyer, or just walked out of the arrangement and dared Cain to enforce a debt that had fraudulent origins. She'd come to him instead. She hadn't fully understood why until this moment. What do we do about Price? She asked. He looked at her for a moment with that attention of his that was too clear to be comfortable. We could separate your father's debt from the question of Price entirely. Have my attorneys review the original transaction. If there's fraud, the contract may be voidable anyway. You could leave. Is that what you want? It's what would be cleanest for you. That's not what I asked. A long pause. No, he said. It's not what I want. She stood up, walked to the window. Denver at night looked like a map of everything that still existed outside this house. I'm not staying because of the contract, she said. I want that to be clear. Whatever your lawyers find, whatever the legal status of the debt is. That's not why I'm here anymore. She turned around. Iris is doing well because she has a consistent physician who knows her case and cares about the outcome. Wren has a friend she'd be heartbroken to leave. And she stopped. I'm not finishing that sentence tonight. He stood. Mara, we deal with Price first. Then we figure out the rest. They dealt with Price over the next 6 weeks. Cain had investigators she didn't ask the details of. Her father cooperated fully, finally honest in the way that people become honest when there's nothing left to protect. The manufactured investment was documented. The chain of transactions was traced. Price was exposed to 3 financial regulatory bodies and 2 federal investigators who had been looking for something to attach to his name for a long time. It was Mara who figured out the final piece. Not through any resource Cain had. Through her hospital network, through a nurse at a Denver practice who'd treated Price's assistant, through a connection that had nothing to do with money or leverage, and everything to do with the fact that Mara Ellison had spent 12 years building a professional life based on trust and reciprocity. Cain found her in the kitchen at midnight when she sent the last email. Is it done? He asked. It's done. He sat across from her. The house was quiet. Wren had been asleep for hours. Iris had fallen asleep on the couch around 9, and Cain had carried her upstairs without waking her. And Mara had stood in the hallway watching that and felt something shift in a way that couldn't be undone. I need to tell you something, he said. Okay, I knew about you before your father's debt came across my desk. He held her gaze. I'd seen your work. A paper you published 2 years ago on autoimmune stabilization in pediatric patients. I'd already asked my team to find you through professional channels. Then the debt landed in my portfolio and I recognized the name. A pause. I didn't manufacture it. I want to be clear. But I didn't try as hard as I could have to find another solution when I saw an opportunity. She was quiet. I used the leverage I had, he said. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I wanted you here. For Iris. And then for reasons that had nothing to do with Iris. When did you know it was both? Month 2. The morning you told the billing coordinator at Children's that you'd personally review Iris's chart before any insurance-mandated protocol change. You didn't know I was in the hallway. He looked at his hands. You were furious and completely certain, and I thought. He stopped. What? That I was in a great deal of trouble. She almost smiled. Almost. You should have just called me. Would you have come? She thought about it honestly. The woman she'd been 8 months ago. Scrubs and exhaustion and a daughter to raise and no room for anything that complicated. Probably not, she admitted. Then I made the wrong choice in the right direction. That's an absurd way to frame it. It's accurate. She stood up, walked around the table, stopped in front of him. He looked up at her. In the kitchen light, he looked like a man who'd been waiting for a long time for something to simply go right. "The contract," she said. "Whatever your lawyers find, whatever the legal outcome, I want it dissolved. Not because I'm leaving, because I don't want there to be a contract." He stood. "Done. I mean it. I'm not a solution to a problem. I'm not an acquisition. I know." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so careful it felt like a question. "You're the person who stayed." She kissed him, not because it was the logical next step or because she'd decided it was safe, because it was the truest thing left in the room after everything else had been said. He kissed her back like it was something he'd been careful with for a long time and was finally allowed to hold. They broke apart. The kitchen was very quiet. "Iris's 3-month follow-up is next week," she said. "I know. She's going to push for reduced monitoring protocols. She hates the patch. I know that too. We're going to have to present a united front or she'll work us separately." A real smile, the kind she still didn't see often enough. "I've noticed she's very strategic. She gets it from somewhere." He laughed. She'd heard him laugh before, but not like that, not unguarded, and she filed it away in the same place she'd been filing everything for months. 1 year later, Mara stood in Iris's room, watching the girl read. The monitoring patch was gone. The autoimmune markers had been stable for 6 months. Iris still had complex medical needs and always would, but she was living with them now rather than being consumed by them. She was going to be fine. Wren was on the floor beside the bed, working on a diorama for school, muttering to herself about the structural integrity of the cardboard T-Rex she was attempting to construct. The window seat, the one Wren had claimed within her first hour of arriving, was piled with both their books and 4 stuffed animals whose jurisdiction had been the subject of several formal negotiations. Cain found Mara in the doorway. "Bev made dinner," he said quietly. "I'll be down in a minute." He stood beside her. They both looked at the room, 2 girls who'd found each other in the strangest circumstances, completely unbothered by any of it. "I was thinking," he said, "that's usually how trouble starts." "About the arrangement." She turned to look at him. "The arrangement? It's been dissolved legally for 8 months. You stayed anyway. You're staying." He reached into his jacket pocket. "I was thinking I'd like to make it something different." The box was small. The ring inside was not flashy. A single stone, clean-cut, the kind of thing chosen by someone who understood what she'd actually want. "I'm not doing this as a negotiation," he said. "No terms, no contract, no leverage. Just a question." She looked at the ring, looked at him, thought about the woman who'd stood in his lobby 8 months ago, with her defenses up, and her list of conditions and her absolute certainty that she could keep this simple. She thought about her daughter's laugh echoing through a house that had started to feel like home. She thought about Iris's face on the morning her labs came back clean. She thought about a man in a gray t-shirt at 3 a.m., talking his sick daughter calm while trusting Mara to do what needed to be done. She thought about how love was not a thing that arrived cleanly or at the right time or without cost. It arrived in the form of someone who showed up in the hallway with a glass of water when your hands were shaking. Someone who kept his word when it would have been easier not to. Someone who told you the truth about his worst moment and waited to see what you'd do with it. "Yes," she said. He slid the ring on her finger. Behind them, Wren's voice carried from the room. "If you're proposing, Dad already warned me, and I told Iris, and we've been waiting for like an hour." Iris's voice, equally dry. "Mom, just say yes so we can have the good dessert. Bev made it, and she won't serve it until you guys are done being dramatic." Mara turned and looked at their daughters. Hers, his, theirs, and laughed. Genuinely, fully, the kind of laugh that started somewhere deep and surprised you on the way out. She walked into the room, sat on the floor between the 2 girls, and held out her hand so they could see the ring. Wren examined it with the severity of a gemologist. "It's pretty," she decided. Iris leaned in. "Dad's spent 2 weeks picking it out. He looked at like 40 rings. Did he ask for your opinion?" "Of course he did. I'm very helpful." Iris went back to her book, then added without looking up, "You're going to be a good family." Mara sat with that. The word family, said simply plainly, by a child who'd been sick for over a year and had every reason to be wary of new things. Cain sat in the window seat. The room was warm. Outside, Denver was doing what Denver did in October, going golden and cold and inexplicably beautiful. "I'm still your daughter's physician," Mara said to him. "I know. That doesn't change. The professional relationship doesn't get complicated by the personal one. Understood. I'm serious. I know you are. It's one of the things," he gestured vaguely. "One of the things what? One of the things I love about you. The list is fairly long. I'll tell you the rest over dinner." Wren looked up from her diorama. "Can I hear the list too?" "Absolutely not," Cain said. "What if I ask Iris to ask you?" "Also no." "What if—" "Wren," Mara said. "Yeah? Go wash your hands." Bev made the good dessert. The room emptied in approximately 4 seconds. Mara sat alone in the sudden quiet, holding the weight of a ring on her finger and something much larger in her chest. Not the life she'd planned, not even close. Something harder won and stranger, and built from 2 years of impossible circumstances and honest choices and a stubborn refusal to let the worst moment define where she went next. She looked around the room, the window seat, the dinosaur books, the monitoring equipment that would stay in the suite down the hall, not because Iris was failing, but because they were careful people who didn't take good news for granted. She heard Cain in the hallway, Wren's voice carrying, Iris's quieter response, and the sound of the house arranging itself around the people who lived in it. She stood up, went to join them. This was her life now, not the one she'd signed up for, the one she'd chosen, piece by piece, in the dark, when it would have been easier to walk away. She had never been more certain of anything in her life.